My name is Sara Smith-Silverman. I'm a professor of history at American River College, and today's date is August 23rd, 2023. So let's start off by establishing the basics. What's your full name? What are your pronouns? And what's your date of birth?
Hello, my name's Lenee Lagarde, and I use she and they pronouns. And I was born February 18th, 2003, born during the generation of Gen Z, whatever that means.
So tell me a little about yourself. What are your interests and hobbies? What do you like to do?
I really like to draw. I try to be more consistent with that, especially when I'm learning how to especially when I'm learning how to expand my ideas a lot more. I've always been interested in drawing since I was 12, even though that's kind of on and off for me, especially during high school and stuff, and then I would pick up back on it. And then I like photography, which is something I've been interested in since my senior year of high school. Then I majored I majored in photography my first semester, then changed it to studio art with still that passion for it. I really like plants. My favorite plant is golden pothos, especially when you can easily propagate them and and yeah. And then I really like to watch YouTube videos and I like to read and write and go on walks. And yeah,
So where did you grow up and where do you live now?
I live in, oh no, I was from Lansing, Michigan. I was born and raised there until the age of 12. And then when I was 12, me and my family moved here. And we currently live in West Sac.
And where do you currently attend college? What do you study?
I go to Sacramento City College and I study studio art. Starting this semester, this is actually my third year going here.
Are you full time or part time?
For this semester, I'm part time.
So can you tell me about how you identify with regard to your social identities broadly speaking? So race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, gender identity, religion, class, and so on.
I am African American. I am autistic, and then I identify as queer, bisexual.
Anything else you want to say in response to that question about social identities? Anything more about sexual orientation, gender identity, religion, anything like that?
Yeah, I'm going to start off with I'm gonna start off with gender identity. Gender identity, like I use she and they pronouns because I like when people use she and her, but I also don't mind they them. And just to kind of clarify that I identify as a woman, though I don't really mind I don't really mind how my gender expression looks like for me. I'm just I like to wear really long skirts or maxi skirts. And I just like to, you know, be more comfortable with what I'm wearing. It doesn't matter.
So anything else about social identities? Anything about sexual orientation or about religion or
Um,
class?
I'm gonna start off with sexual orientation. Alright, I would do sexual orientation too. So for my sexuality, like most of my life, I had crushes on boys and I liked boys in a way. And honestly, honestly, I used to think that I was just attracted to boys. But then as I get older and I start to fully like explore my sexuality and have that discovery. I also learned that I also like girls and I also like MBs and I've also dated people across the gender spectrum, like non-binary people, trans people, and that experience had have taught me like a different perspective on how I see gender in a way. Like it's not just like in being bisexual and queer to me means that I can be attracted or like I'm attracted to anyone across the gender spectrum. And it's just fluid. And honestly it's like fluid. Like I don't want to have my sexuality be defined by anything just because of my experiences of my own attractions, just because of like anything, you know?
So, can you talk some about your coming out experience? What was that process like of figuring out your identities, and how did people around you respond?
Would it be okay if we come back to it?
Sure.
Thanks.
Is there anything else you wanted to say about your social identities and what did you say you're bisexual or past? Okay. So, is there anything else you want to say about that, like what bisexuality means to you, or anything else about your gender identity or gender expression before we move on?
Yeah. And then being bisexual to me means that it doesn't mean that I'm attracted to just two genders. Two genders. It's like more than that. Kind of like I open myself to a lot more. And like from my own understanding of my attraction, I feel attracted to specific genders, but not necessarily at the same time. Or like sometimes at the same time. But I don't know.
Um, did you want to talk about your coming out experience now, or would you rather come back to that one?
Second option.
Okay. So, another question I have is, what does it feel like emotionally to have figured out your identities, and do you feel happy and empowered in your identities as queer?
Hmm. Yes. Especially especially when like day by day I'm like opening myself up to fully accepting that I am queer and like meeting other queer people and like going to the Pride Center and like fully educating myself on like sexual orientations.
So, does that make you feel empowered? You said yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Are you happy?
I try to be like yeah, I try to be.
Did religion play a role in your life growing up at all?
Yes.
Oh, how so?
Especially when me and my family have grew up in like a Christian household, meaning that our grandparents took me and my siblings to church. For my grandma on my mom's side, it would be Sundays. And then my grandma on my dad's side, um it would be Saturdays. So like so knowing that religion had like played a huge role in my life, it kind of made me feel attractive. Because when I was in high school, I started to get into like reading the Bible and praying, and I had like the whole idea of like how the world should be. Although I still have like a curiosity about learning about the LGBTQ plus community and wanting to know more about that. At the same time, being religious at that time made me made me feel pretty limited. And I'm also really glad that I left that behind, because if I was a Christian or stayed a Christian, then my perspective wouldn't look like how it is now.
What do you mean when you say that? How do you think it would have shaped your perspective?
Um, I would still think that, or just like the internal like queerphobia, or like I would have thought that I would have thought that I was heterosexual and still have that belief. And I would have had that belief that like love isn't doesn't vary in that way.
So you feel like it would have been really limiting. You would
Yeah.
have felt trapped. You used the word trapped before.
Yeah.
Um, do you think religion played to some extent a positive role in your life growing up, or I guess if you what do you think the balance is? Do you think religion played a positive or a negative role, or is it sort of more complicated than that? Is it some mix?
Um, I'm not sure. And the reason why I say that, like you said, it's kind of complicated and stuff.
Like there are some good things about it, but there are also some limiting things about it.
Or like it's more negative in a way.
Is there anything else you want to say about that? Okay. And so you said you don't really identify. You don't describe yourself as religious today.
Yeah.
Is that right? So you're not affiliated with any religion?
I mean, I do believe in like astrology and like crystals, but like I don't consider myself religious.
Can I ask about your coming out experience, or would you rather wait on that one?
We don't know.
Okay. So the next section, if it's okay, is about disability. Can we talk about that section? Okay. So you mentioned that you are autistic. So how does this impact you being autistic?
Um, I guess kind of knowing that like I've always been different from everyone. When I was 3 and my parents took me to get diagnosed, um, they would tell they would tell me stories of like when I would get my diagnosis, they couldn't believe that I was autistic, or they didn't want to believe it. And then also during childhood, I I didn't really like being autistic because, like I said, being different from everyone, it is, and like it also made me feel like being different isn't good. So it's like, so like I would definitely hate myself for it. And when I was younger, I would do this thing where masking is where I would mimic other people, or I wouldn't stand, or like I wouldn't do the things that make me whole. And that's something that I did with like other kids. And when I saw other kids do things, like they would make their friends laugh, they would like get other kids to like them, all that. I would study how to do that and I would do it. But regardless of my math, that it still didn't work because like there were still people that bullied me, and I've experienced a lot of ableism and like yeah, and also and I know that now I'm starting to like see the beauty of being autistic and like I meet other autistic people and so friends with other autistic people and I have moments where I unmask and just be myself around those who like me for me. Um, I still have moments where I mask where like where I just don't know how to fully interact with people and I would like and then I would like copy, but then now I start to do less of that and be like, it's okay to just be me. It's okay to just like do me and stuff. And also like I guess I'm also fighting my own way to interact with people.
You said you experienced ableism, or a lot of ableism, and you mentioned masking and being bullied. Are there other ways that you experienced ableism that you feel comfortable talking about?
Inspiration for it. Like those around me say that oh I'm inspired by you, you inspired me. And it's kind of like a high pedestal type of thing. And even though I don't get that much of it now, I'm like, oh no. Mm-mm.
I've seen a lot of that on social media.
Yeah.
Videos of people who are disabled in various ways overcoming their disability, and by overcoming their disability, they're somehow inspirational rather than being inspirational because of who they are in their disability, right? You know
Yeah,
what I'm
really.
saying?
Yeah, I don't want to be seen as like someone that's overcoming their disability. I want to be like seen as being accepted by being autistic. And I'm really grateful that I'm really grateful that I have people too that appreciate me for my autistic identity and like they see me as human.
When you do you have well, what's your experience telling people that you're autistic? Like telling professors, for instance, that you're autistic. Do you tell them that you're autistic? Yeah. And what's that experience been like for you?
I would get like the okay at school. And then other times it would get like other times like it would be like I mentioned earlier, like inspiration for
Do you think your professors know how to be inclusive of people with autistic people?
hmm. So far, I mean, I think it depends on like the professors. Like like they would have like the information from DSPS that helps neurodivergent people, but then not all of my professors really understand the accommodations that I may have when passing my classes. And like that could be, and I had like a professor from ceramics where they just like stuck to their own rules and like wanted assignments to be turned in like at a specific day or a specific time. And knowing that I struggled with like deadlines and like needing more time on something, that was a real struggle for me. And then I also have this one professor. I have this one professor this semester who's actually pretty flexible of what I need. And like I also went to her office hours today and also got help understanding the material and like stuff like that. It was pretty nice.
So, if you, in your ideal world, what would you like professors to do to accommodate and include neurodivergent students in the college classroom? Is there anything in particular you can think of that professors should be doing?
Expanding on deadlines.
Deadlines?
Yeah.
Is there anything about the classroom atmosphere, like the way that they teach group work versus whole class stuff, presentations, anything like that that you can think of?
Hmm. For my ASL class, they would have the group study, like study groups, but that would be mostly online. In my experience of like going to the study group, it was with a tutor. It was with one of my other classmates, and like we kind of like studied the science together, and like although it was good and stuff, I kind of felt myself like not following along a little bit, cause like it was just them like studying the science while like I also told them that, and then they're like, "Oh, okay, we'll make sure to like do the science together," and they were pretty understanding. And I was like, "All right, thank you."
So sometimes without more active guidance from the professor in these kinds of scenarios, you might need to advocate a little bit for yourself if the professor hasn't given clear enough guidance or something.
Yeah, and also the tutor and my classmate were pretty good, and like they were pretty good in like including me in like the study and making sure that my questions were answered and we did the science together.
Have you ever had experiences in the classroom that feel like not accommodating, that feel not inclusive, that feel like that sort of the classroom practices make it difficult for you to be invested and do well in the class?
Hmm. I would say the best examples would probably be my art history and my anthropology. Those are classes that I struggled with a lot. My art history, even though for like quizzes, for like slideshow quizzes, I would always go to the testing room and take my quizzes. And I wouldn't always do really good on them, knowing that I was the type of student that didn't study as much. So like during the first time that I went, I learned that like the study or like the testing center didn't have or like they didn't allow open note, so I would have to like take the test without open note. And I feel like the testing center wasn't really as helpful for me, if that makes sense. And then for my anthropology, it wasn't really as bad. I just like I just didn't feel too engaged in like too engaged.
So, in your classes, have you had experiences in which faculty uh, include topics having to do with disability and neurodiversity in your classes, including autism?
Yeah, I would say I definitely say your class, queer studies, where you include disability and queerness, and you have like the slideshow including like autism and LGBTQIA plus. And I did that. I looked at I looked at the slideshow for extra credit, and I wrote a paper on it. Honestly, it felt pretty nice that like you included autism and disability and neurodiversity in one of our discussions. Cause during that day, like I was like talking a lot about it, talking about my experiences, and like, and then I also heard a lot of my classmates' views, a lot of my classmates' perspectives, saying it is really nice to bring that to conversation and like neurodiversity should definitely be talked about in schools, especially teaching neurodivergent people that it's okay to have strengths. Like it's okay to like show off your strengths to people, and like I would, and also going to strengths for me, I would say that my strengths is like is kind of like talking about my special interests as much, like Abbott Elementary. I would talk about Abbott Elementary to my friends a lot than to my family a lot. And also the faculty staff members as well. And
I'm sorry, can you repeat that, what you just said?
the faculty members.
Oh.
And like there would be times where I would talk about how the characters of Abbott Elementary are really relatable. I can relate to a lot of them, especially Gregory and Janine, and then Jacob. Like Gregory, one of the main characters, is supposed to be autism coded, and like especially when he likes board games, he likes donuts, and he doesn't like pizza. And it's kind of like for me of like any cheesy foods. I like any cheesy foods. I like potatoes. I have like lots of safe foods. That's another strength. And then Janine, I really like her fashion of maxi skirts, especially when like it is really fashionable in my opinion. And I kind of dedicate my style to like that pretty much. And then Jacob, and then Jacob is really passionate about his own views of stopping climate change, and then like he's one of the queer characters of the show. So it's pretty nice to like have a queer person be a part of be a part of a show, and then like, and although Jacob isn't perfect, like he is he's like a white teacher teaching at a black school. He brings attention to like so many issues, like climate change, and then pretty much educating himself, like pretty empathetic, and like yeah.
I'm very familiar with that show.
You watch the show?
Yes.
Yeah.
And it hadn't occurred to me that Gregory is coded as autistic. A lot of the representation of autistic people in the media is actually of white autistic men, right?
That actually bothers me.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of like me and my sister watched Atypical, and I thought of it as like, oh, I'm gonna like this show because it's talking about autism. It's showing the realisms of being autistic. And although I can relate to some, like I had difficulty making new friends or like interacting with people. At the same time, I didn't see myself in the main character because like you said, they're male, they're white, and like most of all, they're heterosexual. And like usually, and kind of usually, when I see that most neurodivergent people in media are mostly represented as white, as male, and heterosexual, it's like it kind of ignored the queer, neurodivergent, people of color, women, non-binary, trans, etc. experiences in a way. Although our society has gotten better at like including neurodivergent people and like realisms like having routine, like being super empathetic towards others, yourself, and towards the environment, and also like being really self-aware. Because for me, like I try to be more self-aware in like what I'm doing and stuff, and also like there's like a piece of representation, Chloe Hayden, who was a part of that was a part of like Heartbreak High. Not only her character was queer and autistic, the actual person, Chloe Hayden, is actually autistic.
That's something I'm not familiar with. Is Heartbreak High a show that's out right now?
Yes, it's on Netflix. And I kind of like to talk about autism. I like to talk about like autism stuff. It's kind of like it's one of my special interests in a way. Not really a special interest, but like something that I like to bring attention to.
Have you had any other experiences of neurodiversity, of autism, in particular, being a subject or a topic discussed in a classroom before, either in a structured or unstructured way?
I think your class is the only experience.
And I feel like in my class, I need to go a lot more deeply into the topic, right? Mm-hmm. So it seems like there's this parallel between queer and trans topics not being covered in classrooms, and then also disability and neurodiversity also not being covered in the classroom. So, and you have two of those identities in you, right? So, yeah. Two of the pieces of your identity that that are obviously very important to your who you are in the world are often not covered in the classroom environment.
Yeah, especially like being Black and autistic.
Can you talk more about that?
I've actually watched a video that kind of paralleled Abbott Elementary's Gregory Eddy and Janine Teagues being autistic. autism coded, autistic coded, and like half of them didn't have many friends, and like how like they both have like specific interests in so many things, and like and this is also something I noticed, like both, and I think that they both conform to neuronormative norms to kind of avoid being judged. And that's mostly in like Gregory. And like remember how I said that he likes donuts? And like and Melissa asked if like you want a donut? And then Gregory's like, no, I don't like donuts. And then in like the interview thing, like he was like, I actually really like donuts.
But he was trying to conform to neurotypical kind of ways or what he thought was expected of him, kind of.
Yeah, well that's kind of expected of him and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And like his interactions with his dad is like being expected to like act and be a certain way. His dad doesn't want him to be like a principal and want him to work for his company. His like his like lawn care company. And that's not what Gregory wants and stuff. And I was like and I'm kind of like and I'm always like that's kind of like me wanting to be a photographer and like having parents wanting you to do something else at first, like something that makes more money. I remember during my senior year of like high school when I was like looking at colleges and I chose to go to Sac City that my mom my mom asked if I could do another major because like the major that I wanted to do photography wasn't something that I could do as a career, at least in like her perspective. And then I was like, no, no, this is actually something that I want to do. Like, and I had that mind, like I have, it had that mindset of like, it doesn't matter how much money, it doesn't really matter the money and stuff. I want to do something that I really love and have passion for. And we like got into like this whole argument of like got into like this whole argument and although now my parents are more accepting of me doing studio art, I can't help but like they kind of bring up that experience and like how this is how this started and this is how it's going type of thing. And like and yeah.
So do you feel like you have experiences of feeling like you're being infantilized sometimes because of your autism?
Sometimes, yeah.
Is there anything you want to say about that?
No comment.
Okay. I just brought that up because of what you were just talking about. Made me wonder, sort of. But so I have a couple of questions that get at intersectionality. So, how do you think your experiences as somebody who is both Black and autistic and queer, like how have your experiences sort of been unique because of your multiple identities? It's a very big question, so you can take any piece of that you want.
I'm going to like divide the like I would start off with like my experience being Black and then my experience being autistic, then my experience being queer. Like my experience being Black and stuff, like honestly, when I was a kid, I used to think of myself as like a brown person. and and especially when I was in fourth grade and I went to like a white school in East Lansing, and there would be like so many white kids in my class, and me and like two other black kids would be the only black kids in our class. And there'd also be like a biracial person as well. And there was also a time where my grandmother had to explain to me that you're black. You're black, you know? And yeah. And
How old were you at that time?
I was like 9 or 10. And this was when my grandma of my mom's side was alive. My my grandmother on my mom's side passed away in 2017.
So, what were those experiences like being one of the only black kids in a predominantly white school? Was that difficult?
It's kind of weird. Kind of like, but also kind of isolating, knowing that there wasn't like a lot of black kids at the school that I went to, and I also had a lot of white friends, so it was like, I don't know.
Did you feel like you couldn't? Did you ever feel like they couldn't really relate to your experiences because of the sort of different racial identities?
Yeah.
Did you guys ever say like insensitive things or racist things?
Hmm. Not really. I don't know. And then when me and my family moved here to California, there was like a lot of racial diversity. Like there were Hispanics, there were Asians, and there were black people, and then there were also white people, of course, too. And like, and yeah, I'm honestly not the best at like, I'm honestly not the best at like explaining things, especially especially when I come across something, I was like, I don't know how to explain that. So I was like, I just give like a short answer.
Have you taken classes that are inclusive of the African American experience?
This semester I'm taking a class just like that for history.
Is it African American history?
Yeah.
And what made you want to take that class? Why do you think it's important for you to take that class?
I've actually been wanting to take a class on African American history for a while to learn more about my my heritage and then learn more about like my history and stuff. Cause I know that I learned about Langston Hughes, learned about Audre Lorde, and like I learned about Audre Lorde in your class and like Langston Hughes in my English writing class my third semester. So like so I feel like just learning about more black people, not just Martin Luther King or Rosa Parks, has especially going to college, it has given me like a larger perspective of how the black community really is, and like how white people took a lot from black people.
Do you feel like you've taken other classes that have centered the Black experience at all, or
Hmm. I think just this one.
do you feel like there's been like you wish the Black experience would have been covered more in your other classes?
Um, like in college or like in general?
Just in general, you could think about previous schools you've attended, also in college.
Definitely in high school. Like the history that we learned was just like white, like all white.
That's disappointing.
Yeah.
And you went to high school in Sacramento.
Yeah, JFK.
So what have your experiences been like as somebody who's both autistic and Black?
Hmm. My experience of like both autistic and Black. Um, I feel like in my family, there's kind of like acknowledged that I'm autistic and accept that I'm autistic. At the same time, like there are like there are some things that they still need to learn about autism, and like for example, understanding that hyperfixations with like stuffed animals and like carry them around. When I was like younger and I would bring my littlest pet shops to school, and it was elementary school. I I couldn't take them with me because like my dad told me that I'm at school to learn and stuff, and this is how school should look like and stuff. And then also, mm, there's also like a lot of masking, even now. But like now it's like for a little bit. I think I think people I think families of color kind of view autism a lot differently than like non people of color. Because like people of colors, families of colors have like a lot of expectations, and like my parents are definitely like that, and like when I was younger, I tried to like live up to those expectations of like going to school, of like having education, and like making sure that my social life was okay. Even though like I didn't really have that many friends. I didn't have that many friends. Even though like I had friends, but like they weren't really my friends. If that makes sense. And then I also I'm also glad when going to community college that I met other people of color. I met other neurodivergent people of color, and like knowing that they have similar experiences, but also like knowing that every person's experience is different, especially when you're a person of color.
That was going to be one of the follow-up questions was,
Oh,
I think that there's an underdiagnosis of autism among, people of color in general, including in the Black population. And so I wonder if it's harder to find community among other autistic people who are also people of color. Have you found that, or you sound like you found some friends and
yeah.
yeah. Um, Anything else you want to say about that?
And then also like there's also some people that are undiagnosed, like they didn't receive a diagnosis, but they're still autistic. there are diagnosed autistics where they have received a diagnosis, but like they have received a diagnosis and like yeah. And then there's also self-diagnosed. And like getting a diagnosis from a psychiatrist can be really expensive. I wish I knew how much how much it took my parent how much the diagnosis was for when my parents took me.
Yeah, and I think so. What we are talking about before, with sort of the kind of underrepresentation of autistic people of color in the media, it might be harder for people of color to self-diagnose because there's sort of right that there's this image of a white autistic boy or man
Yeah.
who has particular traits, right? And there's a lot of stereotyping of autistic people in the media as well. So it's sort of like if you can't see yourself in that particular image, right, that's presented to you on the TV, how do you think it's harder to figure it out for yourself too?
That would definitely be a lot harder.
And it's right, it's for people who are assigned female at birth as well, right? Girls and women and non binary people also have a harder time getting diagnosed or self diagnosing.
Yeah. And also more than likely to like mask. I've experienced a lot of like I've experienced a lot of masking throughout like most of my life. What I mean by that is like middle school and high school.
Because girls and women have more social expectations
Yeah,
put
so
on them, and when
the men.
boys and men act asocial,
Yeah.
they get a pass a lot of the time.
Yeah.
So I can see how that would extend to being autistic also, and then feeling like you have to mask more. Um, so anything else you want to say on this topic about autism and intersectionality? What about queerness and being autistic? How would you say those being autistic and queer kind of shape your experiences? Like, how do you view gender and sexuality, and do you think that's influenced by being autistic?
I kind of feel like since I'm part of the population where autistic people are more than likely to identify as queer or trans, the 70%, I'm like I'm like with my sexuality, there should have been like hints that I am queer, like having like having like a strong attraction towards women and like seeing women just the same as I see men and seeing non-binary people is the same way as I see any other gender. And I guess kind of similar to autism that like I kind of I kind of chose at the time I chose to identify as heterosexual because I thought I thought I was heterosexual and I thought I just liked boys. But then at the same time when like being asked that I was bisexual and asking my family members if what they thought of me being bisexual. And my family said that they would have supported me. Or they would support me. And like same with friends as well. And I guess at that time I should have given myself the opportunity to really explore that earlier. So that I have like so that I have more experience with it. But then at the same time, like I shouldn't have to like rush myself to get that closure. It is taking my time because like there's so many things with like so many like so many stages to sexuality and autism, where at first like it's like in denial. Second, I forget the second one, but it's like
Okay, where did you leave off?
I was talking about like the different stages, and like in both sexuality and autism, I feel like there's like different stages until you get to the acceptance part. Like the first one is definitely denial, like denying, denying. Then the second one is like, okay, I'm kind of like discovering, and I feel kind of good about this, but yeah, I don't know. And then like the third one is like you're coming to like accepting, and also I had to go to therapy to talk mostly about my experiences being autistic and my experiences exploring my sexuality and coming to terms with it. And like it's like with like autism, I knew for my entire life that I'm autistic. And like when it came to me queer and autistic, there's like so many signs that I missed earlier. And like I should have realized that I should have realized sooner. And then I didn't like explore my sexuality until I was 18, where it's like use dating apps and stuff and talk to many other women and non-binary people and not conforming people. And it's had that experience of like putting myself out there. And I didn't really think of it that much. And then recently I would date, like going on in-person dates. Honestly, it is like, it has made me so sure of my identity and make me want to continue advocating for both autism and LGBTQ plus community. And I've also dated a lot of neurodivergent people.
That's good.
Yeah.
Um, okay, I'm sure there are more questions I could be asking about that, but do you feel comfortable talking about your coming out experience, or should we hold off on that?
actually, yeah.
Oh, okay. So, so what was your coming out experience like? You sort of referred to it a little bit. Uh, and how did your family and friends respond to you coming out?
So when I was like 17, I texted them that I'm bisexual. And this was definitely a time where I, this is definitely a time where like I didn't actually explore. So I was like, I'm bisexual. And then, of course, my family is like supportive of me. And I was like, oh, thank you. And then also, they also ended up telling my friends on Instagram, like doing like a whole story and stuff. And then like they're also happy of that. And like one friend was happy, but then they also let me know that make sure like to this make sure that you know that you are. Just to kind of let me know to like think about it more. Cause like at the time like I know that I am this, but then I was like, I'm not sure. I like needed a lot more time.
People who say that they're straight usually don't feel that kind of external pressure to make sure that they're straight.
Yeah.
Or endorsing it. But so you said you were 17 and your family reacted well. They were supportive.
Yeah. And then like I'm just gonna say that my dad talked to me afterwards. I'm just gonna just say that because like I don't remember like some of the conversation.
Have you ever felt like the way friends and family have responded to your queerness? Have you ever felt like you wish they would have been more understanding or more supportive? Have you had any issues?
Not really. But then with like my parents, when it came to the people I was dating, because I was dating online people and they had no idea who I was dating. They just like looked out for me safety wise. And then hmm, I guess my dad doesn't really get like the whole gender thing, the whole pronouns thing. When I told when I told them that one of the people that I was dating used she and they pronouns or like they them pronouns, and mm, and I guess that like sometimes sometimes my parents my parents could forget that like could sometimes forget that I'm bisexual, but that at the same time like they're still kind of like supportive of me.
What do you mean when you say they forget? Like do they ask you about boyfriends and things like that?
Mm.
Or make assumptions about looking for boyfriends only?
Oh no.
Okay.
But then also one time one time my mom asked if I would prefer men or women. Then I walked away at that.
Did that upset you?
Yeah.
Mm.
Especially when bisexuality isn't really the and like it was like after after one of the documentaries I watched on like on trans experiences or like the experiences of trans people that my dad tried to have a conversation with me about how I felt about watching the film. And then I was like, and then I don't know.
Hmm. Have you told your family that you use she, they pronouns?
Yeah.
Okay. Have you found that your family ever uses they pronouns to refer to you?
I find them I find them only using she and her pronouns.
That's not too uncommon. Yeah, experience. There's more of a learning curve when it comes to gender identity stuff than there is when it comes to sexuality. At least in some cases, though. Like you said, there can be some misunderstandings of what it means to be bisexual as well.
Yeah.
Are you out to your whole family?
I don't know. I think I'm I think I'm out to like I think I'm out to like my family, like my parents, my siblings, my grandmother. But I don't know about like my entire family. Although Although my mom has told people that I'm queer, and I should have set that boundary of like maybe let me tell people that. Just like with autism. Oh, also going back to like the previous question, my grandma did ask if I was looking for a boyfriend or had a boyfriend.
Um, would you prefer it if people used she and they pronouns more interchangeably?
Yeah,
And why is that? Why do you feel like that's important to you?
it's like it's like I don't mind they them pronouns. Like I just don't mind it.
Um, let's see. Anything else you want to say about your coming out experience? Like, where did you find the most affirmation and support?
For my sister's friend, when we went to Santa Cruz currently, and like they saw that I was looking at a girl, and I was like looking at them, they were like, "Oh, I see you," and stuff. And then I kind of told them a little bit about my sexuality and stuff.
So, where do you think you find the most support currently in your queerness?
My sister, Lena, my friends, my going to the Pride Center. QSA. I am the president. Although like although I'm still new to being the president and this is kind of my first leadership role. Um, I'm trying to get better at like with communicating with my board and like coming up with newer ideas. I'm currently coming up with newer ideas. And then yeah,
So, do you seek out a community among other Black and queer folks?
yeah.
Can you elaborate? Why is that important to you?
It's really important to like and I am like a firm believer as in like community like relating to people. And that's the same way in like finding other queer and neurodivergent people with other black people. And like my therapist, like and also and also having like and also having a few people in my life that also identify that way is pretty cool. And I say pretty cool a lot because like
Do you seek out a community among other Black students in general at SCC?
yeah,
Oh, how so?
I would go to the Ashe and Rasa Center. Or like sometimes I would go there.
And what kind of community do you find there? Why is it important to you to go there?
I would I would go there to have lunch and like chill, and then I would say hi to the staff and the students there. And like since I know a lot of people there, I would be saying hi to my friends, and then I would like have a safe place there to just like do homework, watch videos, mostly do homework though. Then I would have lunch. I had lunch there. I had lunch there yesterday.
And I have a feeling that you are open about being both autistic and queer in your world in general.
Yeah.
So when you go to the Ashe Center and the Rasa Center, are you also out?
Definitely not to everybody. But like I am out to like some people.
And how do you choose who to be out to?
If you're a comfortable person to be out to. If you're like not comfortable, then I'm going to keep that part from them.
And how do you know if somebody feels comfortable to come out to?
Hmm. I'm going to shake my legs a little bit to think.
That's good. That's okay. Take your time.
Wait, can you repeat the question?
So I guess what makes you feel comfortable, like when you're out to people, when do you make that? What makes you feel comfortable coming out to them? About like what is it about them that you sort of figure out that makes you feel comfortable in coming out to them?
It's not just like the words of like, thank you for telling me, or thanks for sharing your experiences with me, or like I like learning about you. It's like the actions of like, your actions are like welcoming and like you're accepting.
Have you been to any events on campus that specifically are about serving queer and Black students?
Let me think of one. I have been to open mic.
Okay, and that was specifically for queer Black students, or it was just open to?
It was open to like anyone,
Okay.
to any like queer person.
Would you like to see more events and spaces available to people who are both Black and queer, or Black and queer and neurodivergent, and
Yeah.
any variation there?
Yeah.
Would you? Yeah.
I have tried to like I have tried to like go to some that centering people of color and both queer, and I haven't been able to go to all of them.
So when you have been in those situations where it's queer people of color or queer Black people, how does it make you feel to be in that environment?
I feel good. And like 1 out of 10, I would feel a 10 out of 10. Or like from 1 to 10, I would feel 10 out of 10.
Um, so is there anything else you want to say about that? Like, why would you feel 10 out of 10?
I would feel 10 out of 10 because because it just helps me to get more educated on like the on my home communities, and like I get to like learn, and like it gets me to learning different expect from different perspectives of different queer and trans people alike, and knowing that like and also and also feeling like it's okay to have like a whole different experience, and like my experience doesn't have to look like everyone else's. And I think I'm starting to reassure myself that, especially now.
All right, so anything else you want to say about that? My next question probably will be about the curriculum.
Curriculum?
Yeah,
Okay.
but anything else you want to say about what we were just talking about before I move on?
Let's come back.
Okay. So, I know you've already mentioned taking queer studies, which is a course that I taught, but have you had experiences taking other courses that either wholly or in part um, include queer and trans topics or focus on queer and trans topics?
The class that I can think of is the other class I can think of is my English writing class from third semester, where my professor would talk about LGBTQ plus poets like Elizabeth Bishop, Langston Hughes, Walt Whitman, Emily Dickinson, and then a lot of other queer poets and stuff. And I also did a presentation on Elizabeth Bishop and like her entire life and I wrote a paper about her. And like the presentation was about one of the poems of like I lost my mom, I lost my partner, and like I lost two cities. And like her mom lived in one city, while her dad lived in another city, and like had like a really bad experience with her dad's side of the family, and yeah,
Can you tell us a little bit more about her, that poet? You said Elizabeth Bishop?
yeah.
So was she?
Who was she?
Yeah.
She was an American poet.
Was she queer?
Yes.
What were her any other identities? Queer. Was she white?
Mm.
Oh, okay. And you gave a presentation about her.
Yeah.
When was she around? Do you remember?
I think during like the 1920s or 30s.
I have to admit I'm unfamiliar with her. That's why I'm asking. Maybe I should be familiar. So how did it feel to take that English class?
It felt pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
Like definitely like a lot of writing and a lot of like history.
Did you know that queer topics would be covered in that class going into it? And then suddenly,
Yeah.
queer topics were covered.
Yeah.
Was that surprising to you? How did that make you feel when you realized that you were taking an English class that actually included queer topics?
It wasn't surprising, but like it did feel really nice.
Had you had that experience before where you took a class that wasn't necessarily on queer or trans topics and then queer and trans topics were actually covered in a substantial way?
Is it okay if I'm unsure?
Oh, totally. Yeah. Okay. So it felt good to be in a class. You weren't surprised, but it felt good.
Yeah.
So can you elaborate a little bit about why do you think it made you feel good? Why do you think it's important to include queer and trans topics in our courses?
So that a lot of LGBTQ plus people feel more seen in like their community and cultures, because like kind of showing all of us that like sexuality does matter and representation does matter, and especially when and like how we see love and romance is like it should be seen and like written more and like talked about more, especially in schools, not just on social media, not just on the internet. Although it is good to do research and like learn about the people that you really like and stuff. And learn about LGBTQ plus figures and stuff. At the same time, it should also be taught in schools so that there's little discrimination and like there's a lot more acceptance. There's a lot more like queer and trans people just existing. And no more biases. Like just having peace with that.
Do you find that you become more invested in the course when topics relating to your own identities are discussed?
Of course. And like of course. like every community deserves to be heard and like deserve to have their stories heard and stuff.
So, can you say more about the queer studies course that you took?
Yes. My favorite part of the course was learning about like queerness within the black communities and like how a lot of black people have homophobic views towards other black people that identify as queer and there's a lot of internalized homophobia or internalized queerphobia where you didn't want to see yourself in that way, but then you are in that you are identified as that way. And I kind of feel like I have a little internalized queerphobia where like it's just eating at me and like there's these little voices in my head of like I shouldn't be attracted to other women. I shouldn't be feeling this way. It's just like and like I try not to listen to or like I'm learning not to listen to those voices and like just being myself in a way. I've also read more of Audre Lorde's book, the one that I did for class, and I learned that Audre Lorde have had a lot more experiences with women romantically. It is nice to learn about another black woman like coming to terms with their sexuality and like loving other women and like meeting other queer women who who kind of like who kind of like guided them in a way.
So, what do you think faculty can do to make queer and trans students feel more respected in the classroom?
Definitely pronouns. Like asking for each person's pronouns. Kind of like when you have the person's name and then they would put their pronouns, like their respective pronouns and like we all would be respectful of it. And and like to those that aren't really as good at pronouns or aren't perfect at it, maybe like practicing pronouns or practice using they them. Even though like we've used they them pronouns a lot in a lot. And then also for like the trend for like for all like my trans and non-binary friends or classmates, maybe if they have like if they have like a chosen name, they would if they have like a chosen name, being sure to respect that this person goes by this name instead of their dead name. Because dead naming can be really triggering and really disrespectful to trans and non-binary people, and especially when like when there's a lot of like transphobia in like dead naming.
So, anything else you want to say about that? What faculty can do to make queer and trans students feel more respected in the classroom?
And then this also more academic, like having more like having more LGBTQ plus inclusive history. Oh, and then also human sexuality was one of the classes I took. And then I took it during my second semester, then retook it my third semester before I took queer studies.
And how inclusive was that class of queer topics?
Pretty inclusive. They talked about my professor. they bring up the conversation of sexuality, like the different sexualities, like bisexuality, homosexuality, heterosexuality, asexuality, and pansexuality.
Did queerness come up throughout the class, or was it only for sort of a part of the class?
Hmm. I think for part of I think for part of the class.
Mm. So, a general question: what motivates you to learn, just in general, in the classroom?
Curiosity, and then inclusivity.
So, what do you think the college campus could do to make trans and queer students feel more included on campus in general?
In general, like actually listening to queer and trans people. Like if we say that for example we want gender neutral bathrooms, then let's have that. And then if we want to be heard more, then let us have that. Or like if we if we're saying that we should prioritize safety for queer and trans people to avoid hate crimes, then that should be prioritized. My friend, one of my friends, when it came to QSA, they brought up that we should prioritize the safety of LGBTQ plus students, especially with what's going on in politics right now. Like like in Chino, the superintendent for the schools were kicked out by a very homophobic person, a very homophobic, transphobic, biphobic person at Chino. And like the superintendent from Sacramento was expressing their concerns of children being outed without their consent, and like how that can be really bad, or like how that's really harmful for LGBTQ plus students. And the person that she knows like la la la, not listening, get out, get out. Like it was like pretty harmful, and I was like pretty angry at that.
Yeah, we're in a very hostile political context towards queer and trans folks right now nationally, but it's also happening in California in various school districts.
Yeah.
Would you like to see our college administration or people at the district level even acknowledge in some way what's happening politically around sort of like all this anti-queer legislation that's being passed and the effects that that might be having on our students?
Yeah. Especially having discussions about it helps too.
Um, so anything else you want to say about that, about how our college can do a better job of making trans and queer students feel seen and included?
Educating the public on LGBTQ plus history, kind of like, for example, me me and my board have planned, or like in May of 2023, me and my board slash friends did a drag show on campus, and like it was like there was like last minute planning, but it was a good turnout and stuff. Although I wasn't there for it, at the same time, I'm like,
I think you had to be in class, is that
yeah.
right?
At the same time, I'm like, definitely, definitely getting more having more people be educated on LGBTQ plus history, like drag culture and why people have drag culture, and like and like yeah. And also I like to say like for one of my fillers for one of my filler words and stuff.
Okay, so in general, what makes you feel excited about being a college student and what's in store for you in the future for your education?
Hmm. What makes me more excited is like what makes me more excited is being involved in so many clubs. Kind of like QSA, Sustainability Club, a Arts and Communication Club, and then also wanting to do more for the campus, and also my art classes, and then classes that involve LGBTQ plus history and disability, and also African American emphasis. And then after I graduate from here, spring 2024, fall 2024, I would like to transfer to CSU East Bay for my arts and communication, or no, my my art and for the art and design program, and focus more on like the photography type of thing. And yeah.
Okay, anything else you'd like to add or questions you'd like to return to?
Hmm. I've already mentioned that like human sexuality was also a class that talked about LGBTQ plus history and emphasis. Um, what else didn't I mention? Going back to like the coming out one, um, my siblings, not just not just my sister Leda, were also supportive, and like they're also those type of people where we love you, we support you and stuff. And I'm always appreciative of that. And in gen and also on the first question, I have four siblings and I'm in the middle.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.